So now, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Gary Breeze up here to the stage, please. Gary is a member of the Natural Hazard Center Advisory Committee, and he also serves as executive director of the Colorado State Fire Chiefs. And Gary has been a longtime friend and supporter of the center. And when he saw that this year's theme was dedicated to trying to envision the next 50 years, he gave me a call and we talked for a long time about who might be the one to help set the stage for the conversations that are to follow over the next 2.5 days. And so please join me in welcoming Gary up here to give an introduction to this year's 50th Annual Natural Hazards Workshop keynote speaker. So Gary, thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Our opening keynote speaker taught me many things when we served together in FEMA's Region 8 headquarters here in Denver. He's fluent in the composition, tone, and tenor of the language we all use in natural hazards, emergency management, and homeland security. He immediately impressed me when I met him with his quiet, humble, and competent contributions. He's a consummate communicator in both the written and the spoken word, and has written one of the best books that I'm aware of. He'll tell you about it when he comes up, but it has to do with a dog sitter. His calm, analytical approach to problem solving and his ability to think ahead of a developing situation, compose strategies, messaging, and implement meaningful responses are an invaluable asset to anyone or any organization. Paraphrasing some of his words, quote, "When you make a decision in a disaster, you never know how it's going to turn out. Often someone rises to be just the right person at just the right time for this unique assignment during this particular moment in history." He continues and says, "And yes, both responders and researchers who adapt and have a solid foundation often get lucky, but they also have a way of creating positive momentum that carries over to future events and future people. Never underestimate your ability to make a far-ranging contribution," end quote. Ed has made all of these far-reaching contributions and more. He served for nearly 3 decades with FEMA after joining in 1989. He led teams around the globe in response to some of history's most consequential disasters, including 9/11, Katrina, the typhoons in the Western Pacific, the Montana wildfires, and the earthquakes in Haiti and California, just to name a few. He's also managed national incidents and international emergencies with the U.S. Coast Guard, Secret Service, Centers for Disease Control, and Department of State. He served as the U.S. liaison representative to NATO and traveled throughout Europe on emergency preparedness assignments. In March, actually on March 8th, I called to ask for his assistance as the operating environment for the Natural Hazards Center was rapidly changing. His immediate response was, "Yes, but give me a couple days." Then, on March 13th, just 5 days later, he sent a comprehensive 12-page thought paper on the Natural Hazards Center with suggestions for how the center could continue to serve the community in the face of this changing environment. 12 pages in 5 days. Created. I knew he was good. I knew he was awesome, but I didn't know he was that awesome. Most of us, Ed, if you join me, most of us are familiar with the Japanese term sensei, which is usually applied to a leader in martial arts. A sensei is also someone who can point you in the right direction based on their lived experiences, their achievements, and their knowledge. Using the term sensei also identifies someone special who has the ability to lift others up and contribute to their development. Please join me in welcoming my friend, one of my senseis, and our opening keynote speaker, Ed Conley.
Thank you, Dave. Good morning, everyone. Gary, thank you for those kind words. It's such an honor to be here before you at the 50th Annual Natural Hazard Center Research and Applications Workshop. You know, when Lori Peek asked me to deliver this keynote, I was honored, I was thrilled, but a little bit daunted as well. You know, we're just not celebrating or kicking off a conference today. We're celebrating 50 years of research, of grit, and impact that have shaped our field. We're also at a crossroads, staring down bigger disasters, shifting policies, and new threats. That duality, celebrating what we've built while facing what's ahead, is what we must reconcile today. However, embracing that tension is also where progress starts, it's where leadership matters, and it's where the people who have attended this conference throughout its history have always stood. For 30 years, I've worked in disaster response, flood, wildfires, earthquakes, from ski rescues in California to global initiatives in Brussels. Through it all, I've thought a lot about hope. Hope isn't just wishful thinking. It is true, very true, and I agree 100% that hope cannot be the entire plan. But I also believe that hope can be a strategic part of every plan. This center has provided for that for half a century. Under the center's guidance, hope has been a driving force of science to action, rooted in people collaborating for impact. People who have worked together to help communities reduce harm, come back stronger, and save lives. Today, I'll share some ideas and some stories to help bridge research and practice. We'll look back at 1975 when this center was born. We'll address 2025's challenges, and we'll explore strategies to make science more impactful. We'll talk partnerships, and we'll talk how to uplift the next generation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of a journey that honors our past, embraces our challenges, and builds a future where science and hope prevail. So grab your coffee and let's dive in. I want to begin in the beginning, 1975. The days of bell-bottoms and typewriters. Also the days of no Starbucks and no FEMA. The U.S. was reeling from Watergate in Vietnam, trust in institutions shaky. When Lori talked about Mike, it got me thinking, have you ever imagined yourself at that inaugural gathering, that first hazards research and application workshop? You know, what it looked like, cassette recorders, slide projectors, flip charts, maps, physical maps spread across desks. And have you ever wished that, oh my gosh, could I be a fly on the wall and see Gilbert White and Ann White and Claire Rubin huddled together talking about hazards and talking about their vision? Wouldn't you have just loved to have heard firsthand their bold questions? You know, why do hazards become disasters? Who is most vulnerable and why? How do we use science to reduce harm? And how is research beneficial to humanity? You know, those questions that laid the very foundation for our field. And while academics asked those questions weren't academic. They were game changers. And they began an incredible journey, a journey that all of us are still on today. A journey that led to the development of tools ranging from studies to systems, tools that reshaped how we understand disasters, not as isolated incidents, but as complex systems shaped by social, economic, and environmental forces. A journey that has a core mission to compile, translate, and share information about natural hazards, and a journey centered on making an impact by connecting researchers, practitioners, and policymakers. But I think what made this center truly special wasn't just the research. It was the collaboration, and it was the people who believed in that collaboration. I think it's important to reflect on that because that legacy is still our North Star. Those questions from 1975 are ours today. We own those now. And turning those questions into answers and action is how our predecessors carried us through countless disasters. It is how we will carry on through budget cuts and policy alignments and the weaponization of information. It's why we're here. It's why we're celebrating 50 years of turning science into impact and knowledge into help. 1975 wasn't just a year. It was a spark. And that 1970 spark lit up my path, my personal journey years later. And I want to tell you a little story how. Thirty years ago, I was a young FEMA staffer based in Denver. I barely knew the difference between a phone book and a floodplain. I knew the words. I was really good at repeating the words. I didn't understand and the why. I heard about this place called the Natural Hazard Center. I go, oh my gosh, that sounds pretty cool. I'm gonna check it out. So I did the most logical thing for someone naive and not very good at bureaucratic protocols. I just jumped in my car and I drove up here and knocked on the front door unannounced. Mary Fran Myers welcomed me. Mary Fran Myers welcomed me like family. She took me by hand, she dragged me, and throughout the center, she introduced me to everyone. We toured the library, And at the time, it was a real library. It had books in the shelves and research papers falling out everywhere and piled on desks. I passed Gilbert White in the hallway. My FEMA, when I got back to Denver, my FEMA's bosses had a mild conniption. And I should mention, Gary was not my boss then. If Gary had been my boss then, he would have said, I'm going with you and I'm bringing everyone else in the region. But my FEMA boss at the time had that mild conniption, 5 hours in Boulder, no formal visit request, but it didn't matter. I walked out of that visit with something much more important than paperwork. I walked out of that visit with a sense of what this community was all about. And that experience has stayed with me for 30 years. It has helped shape how I have approached every disaster, from floods to fires, hurricanes to terrorist attacks. It has inspired me to seek out others who are bridging the gap between research and practice. And I know we have a fantastic group here from USGS. Lori, can I say USGS or I can't? Okay. From USGS. And you know who this guy is, right? USGS. Waverly person, Mr. Earthquake. He helped run the National Earthquake Information Center in Golden, Colorado. That's another person where I showed up unannounced and knocked on the door, and Waverly couldn't have been more kind and more gracious with his time. And we used to sit in his office, and he patiently answered my many, many questions. This Spirit Center, asking tough questions, sharing ideas, and building relationships became guiding principles for me. It's why I'm here today. It's more than celebrating 50 years. I want to do my part to help carry that spirit forward. We face difficult challenges today. So we need, I think, the same openness, the same commitment to make science work for emergency managers. And we must all join together while we're racing the clock every day. My visit to the center was just the start of my disaster management journey, one that took me from the ski patrol to Nigeria and many places in between. And I want to just share a bit of that with you. I started out on the ski patrol long time ago, like 40 years ago. Broken legs, cut up heads, missing skiers out of bound. It was cold. It was very boring until there was some action. It didn't pay anything. I absolutely loved it. I didn't realize at the time how science informed so many of the decisions we made right there at the scene, from the ABC initial response checklist, airway, breathing, circulation, to the techniques we use to splint a compound fracture. From the ski patrol led me to FEMA, and while I was with FEMA, I worked many of the disasters you'd heard about, the Hurricane Andrew and the Great Midwest floods, and 9/11, Katrina, Deepwater Horizon, the 2010 Haiti earthquake, Superstorm Sandy, and I worked many, many others that may not be in the history books, but they live on in the memories of the families and the communities that were affected, and they live on in my memories as well. After I left FEMA in 2016, I've done a lot of work in the Pacific, a lot with my friends from Maui, and I've done work with the Forest Service and USAID. I've had some assignments in Taiwan, quite a bit in Taiwan, Kyrgyzstan, Nigeria, and North Africa. A few of those projects have been canceled, some are still ongoing. If I had to narrow down from all those assignments, the three most valuable things I've taken away from the people I met and from the privilege and honor it was to see so many amazing leaders step up in different situations. I would offer three lessons to share with you. One, our relationships are the foundation of what we do. Trust, cooperation, communication, and striving for unity of effort are how we leverage science. It's how we leverage resources and expertise and skills to make a difference. Number two is leadership, but not just leadership in terms of how we think of it in titles, positions, but leadership and realizing that sometimes your most powerful and important leadership can come from anywhere and anyone in a crisis. And that sort of leadership matters far more than we realize. And my third one is humility. And humility, as tough it is to go through those situations, humility provides you such an opportunity for reflection and growth. I would say that the third one was my toughest one to learn, but maybe my most valuable. You know, it's funny, when my kids were young, they used to take me to their elementary school on career day, and I would do my FEMA talk. And so one day I was talking to a bunch of 9-year-olds, and I was going through all my disaster stories and talking about leaderships and who stepped up and why. And this one kid, at the end, he looked at me and he said, "You are just like that movie star." And I was going, dang, this talk is going really well. And I stood up, I said, Denzel Washington, George Clooney, and you know, I was urging, okay, let's a little bit more here. And he looked at me and he said, "Forrest Gump." So I don't know if you have ever had the experience of being shocked into silence by a classroom of youngsters under the age of 10. It's a special experience. But then I used my power of reflection. I thought about it. I go, yeah, Forrest Gump. Commitment to family, loyal friend always, duty to country, always showing up at the right time, right place. I can live with that. So I'm not here to try to humble you today. I would never do that. A tons of respect for each one of you and all you do. But I would suggest that as we talk about the challenges we face and the fears we're trying to confront and the opportunities we may have to address those, that we pause when we can and do a little bit of honest reflection. I want to talk just briefly about the challenges we're facing. I don't want to dwell on this, but I want to make sure. I think we have some consensus on some of these and maybe some disagreement on others. I think we are going to have passionate debates throughout this next year on different ways to approach these challenges. I've spent the last 6 months doing a lot of seminars and workshops and meetings all over the country, including Hawaii and the territories and overseas in places like Taiwan and Nigeria. I've probably talked to about 500 practitioners in the last 6 months. And I just want to summarize super short some of the conversations that we've had about threats and challenges. This is not scientific, but I think it some interesting anecdotes. I would say number one and I think this is, we all agree, and disasters hitting harder and faster. Frequency, scope, impact. There's no time to pause, there's no time to reflect necessarily. There's no longer a disaster season. Number two, while we're dealing with all the stuff we've always dealt with, we have such a list of new and emerging threats. We have the challenges with different information. We have geomagnetic storms. We have drone attacks. And then number three are trying to get a grasp on FEMA and the USAID budget cuts and retreat, and how is that going to impact, especially from the state and local level. We know we're going to be looking at more responsibility. Are we looking at responsibility packaged with money? Or are we just looking at more responsibility? And then I would say number five is just the general sense of uncertainty. It's so difficult to plan. You don't know necessarily, you don't know where you're starting from, and you don't necessarily know what you're trying to aim for. So I think more than anything, it's just that general uncertainty. I think a lot of people could move ahead a little bit more optimistically if they just had a sense, is it going to be pretty bad for us, or are we going to get some help? They just need to know one way or the other. And then finally, I think navigating the negative narrative, the predictions of failure, I think we have to be careful about that. I know we're trying to raise awareness about the consequences of these decisions. I know we're leading the charge for more analysis. I think we all recognize there's opportunity to reform, but I think we have to be careful on predicting failure. And I hear a lot from the state and local and territorial people, particularly that people are underestimating us. We're worried about team morale. We're worried about keeping people focused. And I agree. No matter what happens, there are still so many tremendous people and such talent in our industry. And I think that is not unrealistic hope. I think that is real hope to hold on to, and that's going to help drive us for this. So that's my quick snapshot on the challenges and some takeaways and observations for it. You know, whenever I face challenges in my life and whenever I'm trying to figure out what to do, I always, before I jump to strategies, I always look at stories, and I wanted to share two stories with you. My first story is Grand Forks, North Dakota, and the aftermath of the 1997 Red River flood. And I spent about 7 months up there, and I went back and forth for about 10 years. My story features Mayor Pat Owens. In 1997, the city lost its fight against the flood. The levees failed. The entire city was flooded, and 50,000 people evacuated. At the height of the flood, a fire broke out downtown. They couldn't get the fire trucks to fight it because the floodwaters were too high, and a massive part of the downtown core was totally destroyed. Pat had been mayor for only 5 months when that hit. She led her city's recovery, especially during the first 2 years when she was at her most energetic and decisive best. She really had three core principles: lead with reason, lead with optimism, and lead with hope. I think one of the things that when people study her and study Pat's approach to that recovery, I think they underestimate how much she used science. She would study behavioral studies of how people respond to crises, because that would help her understand what the community was going through. It'd help her formulate her message. It'd help her listen better. And then she used data-driven research and analysis to map out her recovery strategy. She talked a lot about a 10-year recovery, and that wasn't a wild estimate. That was data-driven. Her leadership style was was optimistic and practical. She would critique and criticize in private, in heated meetings, no holds bars, identifying the issues, the problems, the disappointments. But then after those meetings, praise in public. Her single goal was to build a team that was as big as it could be and that stayed together. Her catchphrase was, "I appreciate you." And if you were ever on the receiving end of that catchphrase from Pat Owens, it made you just want to go the extra mile. It made you want to do everything you could for her and her community. And then third, her hope. Her hope was sincere, but it was also strategic. She was really good at celebrating milestones of recovery, no matter how small. Debris removed from a neighborhood, flowers planted in a small garden, a school reopening, a business reopening, a festival at the park. And she was used those moments to try to build momentum. She would say, yes, we have a long way to go, but look how far we've already come. Keep the faith, we'll get there. But then she lost re-election. She lost her re-election. People were tired of the flood, but she laid the foundation that continued. And her next mayor, Michael Brown, not that Michael Brown, a different Michael Brown, continued using her principles and continued building on the foundation she built. A remarkable person, a remarkable recovery story. And I don't know, for years it was an international model, and for good reason. My second story, a little bit unusual, but hang with me on it. Any baseball fans here? Baseball fans? Oh boy, not so many. Okay. Extra credit if you're not a baseball fan, but you spot the metaphors in this story, all right? Here's the setting. Well, here's the inspiration for this story, actually. Doris Kearns Goodwin. I'm a huge fan of Doris Kearns Goodwin. I love her appreciation for history. I love her focus on crisis leadership, and I love her gift for storytelling. The other thing that I learned listening to Doris is she encourages people to leverage the things they love outside their professional life, inside their personal life, to find inspiration and ideas. In Doris's case, she loves baseball. I love baseball, so that's why I have a baseball story. So here's the setting. It's 2002. The Oakland A's, a Major League Baseball team, are broke. They have the lowest payroll in the sport, and they need to find a way to compete. The general manager, Billy Beane, lost all his best players, all his all-stars, to the rich team. So he went with analytics. He went with science called sabermetrics to find overlooked, underappreciated, and undervalued players who could get on base. The leadership lessons from that story, I'll highlight 3. 1, translate the science. So Billy, to get his team and his players to buy into this process, he didn't hand them a 100-page research study and read this. He translated the science into terms that they could understand. Get the easy out. Take more walks. Wear out the opposing pitchers. Small victories, easy wins, compound and build up. Ignore the noise. Billy's approach went against 100 years of tradition and conventional wisdom in the sport. Curmudgeons and naysayers and doubters were everywhere. Ignore the noise. Ignore the noise. Don't retreat. Don't give up. If you believe in it, continue. And then I would say number 3, remain flexible and nimble. Analytics and research were a foundational principle of Billy Beane's approach, but they weren't his sole principle. He still trusted and relied on his instinct, his knowledge, and his experience in the game as well to make decisions. So my message here for the Natural Hazard Center, as you look and face the challenges of 2025, maybe you can play some Moneyball. The other lesson from these 2 stories is that, in every crisis, whether it's baseball or anywhere else, leadership always emerges. And that when we face challenge, when we're looking at what seems like insurmountable obstacles and a difficult climb ahead, that if we open the door and open ourselves up for inspiration, then often inspiration will find us. So turning now to strategies for bridging the gap, for connecting research to practice, to supporting our protectors in the field. I have sort of 3 ideas that I came up with: format, accessibility, and relationship, that I just want to highlight for you. And because I'm a federal former employee, I came up with an acronym for you. So it's FAR, and so I want you, when you can, to think FAR. So, format. We will always need systemic research. We will always need root cause analyses. But I think our practitioners need more practical tools for now. And here's why. They're busy. They're impatient. The last 6 months, I've heard more use of the phrase bluff. Have you heard the phrase bluff? Bottom line up front, than I have in the previous 6 years. I hear phrases like, if you're talking to us, be brief, be brilliant, be gone. And the people I talk to, they take great pride in being the person in the arena, and they may bristle at your criticism and your research recommendations or analysis, but they will sincerely reflect on it later. And they may act like they don't care about your studies, but they very much care about what your studies get them. The practitioners, I think, like tools that are readable, finishable, and excellent. So when you can, take your research and tighten it, shorten it, simplify it, accelerate it. Ask yourself, what's the one insight that could change a decision maker's mind? Put that on the first page. Think in terms of more dashboards, checklists, decision models, coordination frameworks, concise case studies, and relevant historical insights. More stuff to grab and go. Deployable science. And ask practitioners, what keeps you up at night? You might hear things like, how do I mobilize the public? How do I confront misinformation and disinformation? How do I ensure team welfare? How do I build sustainable partnerships? How can I be a more decisive and fearless leader? How can I take accountability? And they might also say things like, how can we stop focusing on who's to blame? And how can we start concentrating on what happened and what we do about it? So if you design more tools, if you think format, if you can help practitioners get their hands on things that are simple, clear, on ready in day one, I say, go forth and let it rip. Number 2, accessibility. You have research and you have data. I would encourage you to look at at how you can better get your knowledge to emergency managers and policymakers in the right form at the right time. I want you to think and imagine about your science in the operational room and in those policy decision-making rooms at critical moments. Studies that are not on a shelf that everyone's looking for, but studies and insights, papers that really shape how emergency managers mitigate, plan, respond, and recover. And imagine a scene where they're debating this huge decision, and someone says, let's look at the scientific backing for that. Let's look at the scientific evidence that. Let's look at the research that explored that. And imagine they know how to access it. Social media is one way. I think one way to connect your research and make sure practitioners have access to it. And I want to give a shout out. Is Jeanette Sutton here? There's Jeanette. Hey, hi, Jeanette. Yes, I want to give a shout out. Hi. I want to give a shout out to Jeanette. I don't know if you've seen it. Jeanette does these case studies on LinkedIn. She does a short profile on alert and warning, and she'll describe an alert and warning message. She does a no-nonsense, no BS breakdown, what's good, what's not good, and then she provides recommendations. And Jeanette, you may wonder if you're making an impact. You are making a huge impact. Those are must-read case studies for many of us. And I talk about them all the time when I do my talks. And I think that's an example how, maybe you can, if you want to get your research more in the hands of practitioners, maybe leveraging some of our social media influencers. We have emergency managers like Kelly McKinney. There's the UK's Lucy Easthope. There's instructors like David Fukutomi. There's Brandy Hunter, who helped find aspiring emergency managers online. These folks have vast networks. They do workshops and they do podcasts. And they have thousands and thousands of followers. I think linking in and tying in with them, they're like the Taylor Smiths of our industry. They amplify to us what matters. They have the pulse on the industry. They'll find your research gold and they'll share it with the rest of us. And then finally, I wanted to talk relationships. I want to ask you, and I want to encourage you, what more can we do to uplift our up-and-coming generation? Through the intercurriculum studies, more leadership, more analytics, more history. What more can we encourage them? Can we frame our research on how they can succeed, not just on why they might fail? Can we help them find historical models of leadership, people like Pat Owens, that they might be able to emulate? We're going to need them sooner rather than later. We need them to help them be able to make ethical, moral, and impactful decisions under extreme pressure. And so I encourage you, again, that relationship, that commitment to that, especially among our young generation, is going to be so critical to making and developing research effects. Our research alone won't save us, and action without knowledge won't either. But when we bring the two together, when we connect the right minds, the right tools at the right time, that's where we make an impact. So consider this. The Natural Hazard Center isn't just a place, it's a launch pad. But to get where we want to go, we must stay united. We must celebrate milestones, no matter how small. Let's ring the bell whenever someone turns data into decisive action and knowledge into hope. But continue to be a relentless advocate for evidence-based policy, even when the politics shift. None of us is immune to changes in political currents, and the ebbs and flows in our work that can result. But what can't change, and what we are counting from you, is that your core beliefs in data, research, and analysis stand forever. And finally, I want to ask you to open the door and not only inspire, but be inspired by the optimistic, committed, and awesome people in this field. Because relationships combined with enthusiasm will fuel progress. So Lori Peak, thank you. And thank everyone at the Natural Hazard Center. I got this old Beach Boys song stuck in my head. God only knows what we would be without you. You've built a field that saves lives and gives us hope. My call to you, continue to act with urgency, grace, and humor. Make new friends across disciplines and hazards and borders. Together, we'll face threats with hope and turn research into action. All right, let's get to work.
Everyone, thank you for your time, attention, and care. And Ed, thank you.